Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tarnished Bronze. Patrick, what do we have on the docket today?
Today is X-Men number 190 and 191 from, I believe, 1985. And it's the X-Men co-starring the Avengers against Kulan Gath.
Okay, so Kulan Gath being a Conan villain, I believe, right? Or at
Yeah, and I
least
was
in the
wondering if you had, because I know you like Conan, I was wondering if you had seen him before this.
I have seen him before due to my extensive sort of Conan readings. He comes up in that Marvel series. I'm kind of shocked that they don't use Tothamon, who is like the major Conan villain, but I think it might be a rights issue. Like some Marvel people actually kind of created Kunan Gath, I think. But I'm also shocked that John Romita Jr. hasn't done any Conan. Like he
Hmm.
does a really good sword and sorcery story here, even though this is the X-Men. I thought that pirate ship thing, which we'll get into later, just looks really cool. The swashbuckling. I mean, he can already draw the boots, so I mean, he's got it going down. So this, just for everyone's sort of benefit, is Chris Claremont on the writing scripting duties. John Romita Jr. and Dan Green are the art team here. Now, Dan Green will keep it pretty consistent for everybody. So he's the inker over Mark Silvestri, Paul Smith, and John Romita Jr. during this period. And Patrick, is this one that you picked up right from the newsstand?
Not 190. I didn't have 190 until probably, I mean, maybe college. But 191, I got straight from the grocery store.
Okay.
And when we get to that one, it has an amazing cover, probably one of my favorite comic book covers of all time. I mean, there are a lot of those, so it maybe to say it's top 50 is still really good for me.
Okay.
Or let's say 25. But yeah, the next one is a great cover, and it also has a very handy recap. So if you start with 191, once I got 190, I realized having 191 was pretty much sufficient. But these both are just great. Rereading them for the hundredth time, for me, it was just as good this time as it was. Maybe not the first. I mean, when
Yeah.
you're 11 or whatever, it was
Um,
pretty fucking
I
good.
don't know
But
what 11-year-old is wanting to like look at this cover and just not be just
oh,
creeped out by
horrified, right?
yeah.
I remember just being obsessed with this Xavier Caliban creature. I love sword and sorcery fiction anyway, and especially sometimes, we always talk about the Legion. Sometimes when you can combine that with the future, that's great too. I mean, of course, this isn't with the future, but I love that as well. But Kulan Gath is very awesome villain, super powerful in this two-issue arc, and very scary too. I mean, look at that face.
Yeah, and they're doing good to mix in some seeds of future X-Men stories. So we'll get into that at the end of the episode, Patrick. Kind of like, is this the beginning of your end, as far as your interest in the X-Men? But nonetheless, we've done Chris Claremont, our sort of introductions to him. Like I said, mine was like a Fantastic Four in the mid 90s, and I think yours would have been somewhere along this golden run of
Yeah.
X-Men. JrJr, Patrick, what can't we say about John Romita Jr.? What hasn't he done in comics that's worth doing?
I have to say too, because I like a little bit of a cleaner line and a more cartoony look naturally. But this art is it has a little bit less of a distinct line, but he's so good that I still love it. I love the art on the X-Men at this time, but looking back, I know it's sort of traditionally not what I maybe would have gone for back then. I kind of like that cleaner look of the JLA of the mid 80s, kind of
mhm.
that DC look that they had. But I love this, and of course, it the action and the movement and the expressions. I mean, it lends itself to the story perfectly. But just in terms of the the accessibility of sort of a kind of a more messy art style. It works for me.
Yeah, so for me, John Romita Jr. has all of the expressions, and I'll highlight some of them as we go through this. He's got all of the expressions that his dad has, like John Romita Sr. with all of those, especially the female characters. He does great expressions. If someone looks surprised, you don't need the caption to tell you this is surprising. They look surprised. But then he's also got that Frank Miller action style. Like he can sell sort of like a car chase or a swashbuckling sword fight. Not everyone has all of that stuff. And it just so happens that JrJr can do that. And in a story like this, where we're gonna have a lot of exposition and explaining of what the hell's going on, as well as these action set pieces, I didn't feel bored, even though both these issues are like 25, 26 pages of story. These, I don't know if you noticed that, Patrick, but these are kind of super long. And just
Oh,
to
and
illustrate,
a lot of words. Exactly.
yeah,
When I cracked the first one, I was like, oh my God, so many words. But you're exactly right. It captures your attention immediately and it really draws you in and it keeps you interested. I 100% agree. Um, and there needed to be some explanation. I think this two arc story is a little bit of a departure, right? The X-Men is chugging along with their own storylines. I think this happens pretty shortly after Life's story. I'm
yeah,
almost
yeah.
positive.
So it's
And
Punk
it's a
Storm.
little bit of a one-off. They step outside of their normal path of what they're doing, and then kind of dovetail right back into probably what Chris Claremont had in mind. But Kulan Gath, what I've gathered is this is a sort of a tale of revenge. I think he was maybe in I want to say a Marvel team up probably with maybe Conan, or it could have been another Red Sonja or
Yeah,
somebody
I
like
think
that.
I think it might be Red Sonja. A Marvel team up with Spider-Man and Red Sonja, and Kulan Gath is sort of the villain in that piece. Nonetheless, like what I do enjoy here is we don't spend too much time setting the scene as like how this has happened. We just are thrown into the story, and we have this kind of governmental panel, and maybe this lady is like in Shield or something. I'm not
I
totally
think that's
certain.
Valerie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess Rogue. Do we? Oh well. Okay. So when I did Life Story preparation, I kind of went back a little bit. Oh, but that was actually in Life Story, wasn't it? When
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
messes
So
her up.
she's the
So
strangled person. Is that the
I think that's
okay?
Valerie Harper. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so
So, but you're exactly right. We suspend disbelief and we just jump right in to the fact that this is the current setup. This has happened overnight. We wake up in a whole new world, and the whole story sort of takes place in a day.
and I really like the incredulous look on this guy with his tortoiseshell or half moon glasses or whatever he meant to call it. He's just like, really, this is what's going on. And they kind of sell everyone here is all in sort of, fantasy land or sword and sorcery, or dare I say it, the druids dream garbs from their, from these old-timey sort of Conan outfits. And I really like how they kept the core of the design of the modern characters, but gave them that twist for, they're different enough, but not absurdly different. I mean, I
And
think
still recognizable to people who are reading the stories at the time. And I have to say, I was really into comic books, but I didn't have probably a whole lot by the time I got this one. So somebody like Star Fox, even though I was getting into the Avengers right around this time, was relatively new. So to be able to recognize Star Fox or Wasp, who's a little
yeah.
bit less recognizable especially in this uh, sort of barbarian motif that she's sporting, they were still recognizable to me as a kid. So
And so at the local lawn tennis association, Patrick, is Star Fox's dress, is that hemline appropriate, or are we
maybe a little short for the country club.
yeah, it's shorter than Scarlet Witch's. So that says everything that you need to know about this character in one foul swoop. So I couldn't pass up the opportunity to comment on that. although Steve Rogers is just rocking the loincloth look, but he has the same boots,
Same boots.
which is pretty good. So anyway, yeah, we get into this story. Kulan Gath has overtaken Manhattan. It's kind of turned into a sort of J.R.R. Tolkien Wheel of Time-esque area of sword and sorcery, and essentially he's trying to get his own back. And after
We
a
should.
few pages of explaining this to the governmental officials, we kind of just go then straight into the story part of this. So it seems like everyone who was on Manhattan is changed. We're not sure if you go in there, whether you lose your memories of the modern world and so on and so forth. But do
Yes.
they like it seems like Spider-Man's outfit is normal there. They know that some people are still in there at this point, right? So there's a lot that was covered in that first couple of pages. Um, but nonetheless, oh, I'm on the wrong story. Nonetheless, we've got Storm, and it's just so we're fully aware, Storm is in it's the punk rock Storm, still no powers, and she's already got grief with Callisto in our mainline story. So a lot of this stuff is the same kind of like character interaction, just done through this different prism, which I find really cool as well.
And
And
they do
some
explain that, right? In the exposition, they're saying that when you enter into Manhattan, you lose your memories of the modern world, but your relationships with other people remain the same. So they do sort of explain that in the build up, so that these characters aren't completely mind wiped. They still have their interpersonal relationships to a degree. Now, some of them have fallen under Kulan Gath's control, so they're some of the heroes or Morlocks are kind of, let's say, evil
yeah.
adjacent at this point.
Yeah, so Storm is trying to escape, and look at all these page like one panel here is good enough for a pin-up or a splash this a lot of these just so many details, so it's great action. And like I said, the costuming, this isn't just like, oh, I'm gonna put everyone in bodices. Like the costuming has had some attention paid to it as to what their normal character looks like in the real world. I think that kind of can get glossed over here, but Callisto is recognizable from like a slight adjustment to a usual outfit. And Storm, you can tell just Storm is she's not jazzed. Let's put it that way.
It'd have to be a lot of work, but it would be so much fun, right? To redesign these characters in a Conan the Barbarian style. I think that would be a great thing to be able to do as an artist. But at the same time, in order to put some thought into it, it probably took a lot of effort.
It's a lot. It seems like a lot of heavy lifting for two issues. I'm shocked that I know that this is 2025 and soon the X-Men will be returning to the Savage Land. I'm shocked that they haven't done a spin-off series of the Kulan Gath world.
Hmm,
I mean, sign me up. Just take my money.
I agree. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So Patrick, we've covered Storm. She's captured by the leader of the Morlocks, Callisto, who seems to be having this deal with Kulan Gath. They're kind of working together. That's kind of what I gather. But there's some real swashbuckling that happens here. Like this is over three or four pages. Just look at these through lines. Just look at this is depowered Storm, might I add still, right?
I'm sorry.
This is depowered Storm still.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Just an act sort of like a James Bond action hero. Or Errol Flynn as Robin Hood.
Climbing the netting and on the lower middle panel is with the knife in her teeth. That one, that's probably my favorite. That's
Yeah.
great.
Just such fun. And then we get the set piece. So no pirate movie or no sort of seafaring movie set in the age of ships is ever complete without having someone up in the rigging or up on the boom doing their two-dimensional double dragon fight. Like it's like an old time video game. It's two-dimensional. You've got the two characters going side by side. Here we get this great like length shot of the thing where we've got our two protagonists who are gonna go at it. And just it's just so fun. Like we've had 4 pages of talking heads, which didn't bore me because it like got me into the story. Now we've got 4 pages where basically nothing is said. It's just this action. Like, let's just get it together. Someone is getting attacked with a dagger on a ship, which is like, and they're on the boom, not just on the deck, and also it's on fire. Like, you just forget how much goes into each issue from this era of comics. And we've seen some that don't have much go on and yet use all this text and it's just boring as hell. But when so much goes on, you can forgive the captioning because like we've got to reset a scene and we're going to have a lot of characters here. So I think Chris Claremont occasionally gets a bum rap for his captioning, not so much his dialogue, which is always good, but the I think he does a good job here because there's a lot of stuff to pack into this. And at the end here, Storm has escaped, but she's not safe. So she leaps off this boat. And then after that, she's escaped but not safe. And we cut to Spider-Man, who seems to be with some of the new mutants or some of the Avengers. I can't quite neither us nor the captioning kind of like gets exactly straight whose side is on whose yet. That's going to be revealed in a little bit. But Spider-Man knows that this is not the world as it should be, where some of the other characters don't actually know that the world has changed. Is that fair, Patrick?
I think he's the only one at this point. He's the only person that, because he's the object of Kulan Gath's revenge, he's the one who has not been affected by the spell. So
Okay.
he knows what's going on, and he recognizes these people, a lot of them, and why are they, attacking him? And to answer your question, the New Mutants were sort of conscripted by the Xavier Caliban hybrid. So that was created for Kulan Gath to be able to find and then control additional mutants. The way they explained it was the Morlocks sort of woke up under his spell and were already part of his evil army. Because they were so hated by society, they were maybe a little bit easier to conscript, is the way it's
Okay.
kind of explained. So the mutants are sort of the soft spot in terms of the heroes for Kulan Gath to kind of go after. Of course, the exception is the X-Men, who are, morally superior. And then in this scene, we're starting to introduce the Avengers, who are just kind of hanging out, having some beers at the local pub.
Yeah, yeah. So that's one thing I like. You just stumble across the Avengers in the local dive. Yeah, and just really good. Like John Romita Jr. will eventually draw what seems like 500 issues of Spider-Man. He's doing a pretty good job here. I actually haven't seen him do the Avengers quite as much, but I think his style lends itself to those sort of team books. He seems to be able to do a lot of characters here. And then the other aspect of this is the sort of main Avengers and Storm and Callisto are kind of playing against type, right? So they're not what is the phrase? The enemy of my enemy is not my friend, but someone who at least I can do a deal with, right? And it
Well,
seems
especially
like
that comes into play when once Celine is involved,
okay,
right?
yeah,
So, when Storm falls off the boom, or she kind of dives, and I think Callisto kind of falls, they're swept outside the power of the spell, and they become their real selves. Now, they obviously have beef, like you said, as the kids
yeah,
20 years ago said. Um, so they are contacted by Celine, who is the newly appointed Black Queen of the Hellfire's Inner Circle Club, because she's an old foe of Kulan Gath. Now, I'm thinking that this is probably a retcon. I don't think Celine was ever in Conan.
No,
material?
I don't think so either. I think that she makes an appearance in the X-Men mostly as like the new sort of Hellfire Club with Sebastian Shaw and all those kind of people. Did
But
she
she is
take
an ancient
over from
vampire.
yeah?
So
Did she take over from Madeline Pryor, or is that because my reread isn't up to here yet?
Madeline wasn't yet. Phoenix, Jean Grey was the previous Black
Okay,
Queen, and then when she sort of lost her mind, because of Jason Wingard, I guess
yeah.
that's his name, had kind of manipulated her mind as Mastermind. Is that his
Yeah,
name?
so I have read that stuff, and my great reread is just like actually just slightly ahead or slightly behind this, and I was wondering because I there's a Phoenix-ish character, and I'm fairly certain that that'll end up being like who I just mentioned, Madeline Pryor, but I'm not sure if she's introduced yet into that role or if that's just down the pike, big time. But that means that Celine is quite powerful if she is like stepping into the shoes of what was the Dark Phoenix and or Jean Grey, right? Like that is not a trivial slot to take in the Hellfire
She's
Club.
an excellent villainess. One of my favorites from this time period. Very threatening in a crazy way. Just captivating as a villain. She's an ancient vampiric mutant. So she has her
Yeah.
mutant powers, which I think are being able to control inanimate objects. So she's basically kind of like the Molecule Man in that way.
Yeah, like a
Um,
poltergeist mixed with a vampire. It's kind of
yeah.
fun.
She
Um,
can absorb people's life force and turn them to dust, so she stays young forever. She's been around since ancient times. She's a sorceress, so she also has magic. So yeah, I mean, she's a pretty relatively omnipotent villain.
so Patrick, is she a villain of Doctor Strange primarily, or is does she just beat around
Oh
the
no,
Marvel
just the
universe?
X-Men. The way she's introduced is that I think her original introduction when she comes into the Hellfire Club is that she has an adversarial relationship with Magma, who is from is it Terra Nova?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Magma, one of the New Mutants, is a princess from a lost city in South America.
Okay.
And I think it's like sort of a Roman colony that then was cut off from the motherland and then sort of evolved on its own. And Celine has been terrorizing Terra. I think it's called Terra Nova. I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I read this. And Celine, I think, kind of follows Magma. I think her name is Amaya to New York City, and then I think that's how she sort of gets mixed up with the X-Men.
Okay. And
So
it's
in doing that, she runs afoul of Rachel Summers, the new Phoenix, and as we know from some future comics that we're going to do, spoiler alert, that they have a tete-a-tete as well. So like I said, Celine was very mixed up with the X-Men at this time,
okay. That
and
might
I
have
loved
been
every experience.
that might have been who I meant, Rachel, rather than Madeline Pryor. I think Madeline Pryor is like way later. Rachel
Yes, yes.
Summers is who I misspokingly said. So at least we've sorted that out, and we've all had a chance to look at just some great artwork. So we're going from this fantasy world into these like modern day sewers underneath the Hudson Bay. Like, does that get from Manhattan to New Jersey? Is that the sewers that
Well,
we're in?
they're swept into the Hudson River and then they're picked up by the National Guard, right? Who
Okay.
is monitoring the rivers because they can tell where the spell ends. So when they're washed out outside the range of the spell, they're picked up by the Coast Guard and or the National Guard, and they're sort of at that point put in holding. They're contacted by Celine, who says, look, I've already conscripted Rachel Summers, the new Phoenix, as well as Magma, the new mutant. Why don't you come and help us defeat Kulan Gath, who's an old enemy of mine? Storm and Callisto don't really have any other options, so they decide to join up, which is where it comes in a friend of or an enemy of my enemy is my friend,
Hmm.
and they go back through the Morlock tunnels to get back into Manhattan.
And at this point, we are doing a few extra pages this month, so we're just gonna like do some lines on the page just to fill our day up because there's so many things that we have to keep drawing, Patrick. But what I do love is like look at the Avengers plus Nightcrawler, and maybe is that Rogue meant to be Rogue?
Hmm.
Yeah, like they're just, you know, Romita Jr. is just so great at drawing your attention to things that you're the center of attention in this panel because all the eye lines are looking right at you. He does that dynamism really well, and then the next panel you kind of see, oh, this is what they're looking at, and so that's the sort of triumvirate that we have. If we're going to keep going with this Roman thing. She's got Magma and Rachel sort of in her pocket. Now, there's just a lot going on here. It didn't seem like confusing in the sense that I don't know what's going on. It seems like confusing in the sense that there's all of these spinning tops going on, and you don't know who's gonna save the day, or if the day, obviously the day will be saved. We know that the X-Men comic keeps going, but what are the stakes? Um, and it seems like Rachel Summers kind of sort of drafted in like a halfway house. The New Mutants series is going on. She does appear in some of these X-Men issues, but no one really knows really what to do with her. I think this is the turning point where she becomes like more of a major character as opposed to like just a shadow of someone else or an echo of Jean Grey, which cheap, like in many ways that was a cheap shot, but now we're doing something with this echo of the X-Men past. And even though it might seem like a cheat in this panel up in the top right, it definitely like looks cool as far as like a magical mystical force doing that kind of like the picture is made up of all of those just lines rather than the picture being fully drawn. I kind of like that effect on these bottom two panels, Patrick. It makes
Oh
her
yeah.
seem like she has something going on that we're not really privy to. Um, and like I said, I wasn't sure that she was manifesting all of these mystical powers until Kulan Gath arrives on the scene. So this is kind of like a cool way of using her abilities. And then we have here like the upshot, everyone is getting their plan done. These are just like great panels. I love the coloring here. Like these could almost just be black and white newspaper
Mm.
stuff from like Flash Gordon or something. Like that headdress just looks real cool. Like I didn't notice it from that angle before, but it just the
Yeah, and the
design
lighting
and the effort
on the
that's gone
Nightcrawler
in.
panel is really great too.
Yeah, and we get our classic Avengers assemble in an X-Men. So Patrick, between you and me, this ish, and I can't not mention another one of these great facial expressions with Steve Rogers down here. Like that looks like Captain America about to take off or take on the Red Skull. Like these kind of images just look really great. It just so happens that there's five or six of them on the page, and we get our Avengers assemble in the middle of this X-Men comic. It's kind of cool. Like they're short selling this of X-Men Avengers
Team up, yeah,
team up with
yeah.
Spider-Man. By the way.
Oh, and Doctor Strange.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah,
so my Doctor Strange query was, has he crossed paths with Selene? Maybe or maybe not. I know
I
he
don't
is
think so.
he's in a maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of this, also drawn by Romita Jr. He is in an annual, X-Men annual. So he does have the bloodlines as like his bloodline as well as his career bloodline in these sort of juggling of all of these characters. But I wasn't sure that Doctor Strange had been in the X-Men comics before, unless I'm missing some pre-Claremont joke issue with Roy Thomas or something.
I can't think of a time that he's been with the X-Men, but I don't think he's run afoul of Selene yet.
Okay. All right. So
I
it's
feel
just
confident about that. Now they may have snuck him into an X-Men somewhere, but I don't think so. Like I have all of the, from sort of the introduction of the new X-Men
yeah.
through well beyond this, and I can't think of any Doctor Strange appearances, but like you said, could have been a one-off, maybe not in the main title. It's possible. But just to explain Doctor Strange, they do explain him away, right? He's that panel is a really amazing panel too. I don't know if it's in this issue or in the next one when we see what Kulan Gath has done to Doctor Strange to prevent him from using his magic. He
There's
knows
there's
that
two
he's
panels like that. One with there's a couple of characters that have these beautiful expressionless yeah, we're gonna see it in the next issue, I think,
okay.
Patrick.
Okay. I was going to say he knows, Kulan knows that Strange is his chief rival in terms of being able to stop this because he's the only person with the magic powerful enough to prevent, him taking over Manhattan. So he sort of takes him by surprise and like I said, warps him in a way that prevents him from using any of his spells. And it's another thing like the Xavier Caliban hybrid that it's very effective and sort of haunting and just really amazing artwork.
So what I'm getting at here, Patrick, is I both think that, or as we kind of both think that JR Jr. gives us the jeopardy. So a lot of comics is the writer telling us about the jeopardy that the character's in, but we wouldn't know it. This seems to have stakes, as we both like to say, that there seems to be some jeopardy on the line. I mean, we're fairly certain that the X-Men and Spider-Man are going to get out of this, but at what cost? You know,
No,
that's
that's a perfect encapsulation of what's going on. We hadn't spoken about that, but you're exactly right. That's what was so appealing to it as a kid. Also, is you can feel the tension, you can see the tension. It's there, and the sort of confluence of villains and sort of the lack of control and, like you said, the chaotic nature of the plot. It's not hard to follow, but it does feel chaotic and sort of panicked in a way, 100%. And I actually think 190 is a good setup, but I actually feel like that and the stakes are raised incrementally in 191.
Oh, yeah, we
191
haven't
is
even done that many
even
villain
better.
reveals. Like, I think the villain reveal is maybe when they're doing all the jibber jabber about, like, to the government and what's going on. But I don't think the villain has much screen time in the first issue. Like, it's kind of like, you know it's going to happen. And when it happens, you've kind of ratcheted up the tension a lot because everyone is expecting this thing. So, Patrick, again, not so he was on the cover of 190. The villain is not on the cover of 191. But what do you think about this? Like, this is just like a Marvel greatest hits, right?
Yeah. I mean, echoes of Crisis, right? As well,
Yeah,
with all the
yeah,
faces in the background.
yeah.
I
Just
love the Kirby crackle of the Vision's powers. I have a soft spot in my heart for Colossus. He's one of my favorite characters from this time period. And yeah, like you always love to say, how there's so much action and movement in the drawing. And yeah, I really love this cover.
yeah. His it's selling the issue. This was also selling. Like if you're going, oh, I'm not sure about these X-Men, like, and you look at this first page on the while you're at the news agents, that's a hell of a page. And look at how deranged these
Yeah.
like some of the expressions from some of the people in the background are. Like, I think
Look
some
at the
people
Scarlet
just have
Witch.
some people just have a torture fetish, and whoever this is, they're just like loving it.
That's Daniel Moonstar or what? That's
Okay.
yeah, the leader of the New Mutants, along with Sam
Oh,
Guthrie.
this is
That's
Cannonball
Cannonball,
and
who's from Eastern
okay.
Kentucky.
Yeah,
Shout out
yeah.
Eastern Kentucky.
Sam Guthrie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But look at the Scarlet Witch, how maniacal she looks.
Yeah, they all just look nuts. Yeah, everyone's just like wanting to tear a piece of Spider-Man's hide out. And you have to remember, this is fully Corpus Menti Spider-Man. Like he knows these
Hmm.
people well, especially in the case of like Scarlet Witch, like who he has he's aware of in his real life. Like, I mean, maybe he's just tangentially aware of the New Mutants, but he knows Scarlet Witch and Vision. Yeah, that
Now, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you, but in one of the online groups that I kind of lurk in, this issue came up, and I think this splash page in particular, and there were a lot of people, of a certain age, people who I guess were collectors around this time, same as me, who really had issues with this. It was too graphic, I guess too torturous. I don't know if the stigmata in his foot was another issue, But people, there were quite a few comments that this page had gone too far, which kind of surprised me because, like I said, 191 is the one. This is my comic. This is one of my favorite
Yeah.
comics from being a kid, and this is the one I had. And I don't remember having any reaction at all. I mean, I loved it, and I definitely, responded to the torture. Spider-Man was never
So,
necessarily my
Patrick, let's
favorite
just get this
character.
straight. It's a family channel. Patrick is not responding to the torture in the way, like he's
Oh, yes,
responding to it in the sense that it's thrilling, it has jeopardy. We've got
exactly.
some real visceral consequences for Spider-Man being captured. Um yeah, it just I don't know, let's drive the price of this down so that we can buy the original art and then jack the price of it back up with our Patrick, where do I get one of these cool hats that Kulan Gath has?
Yeah, that I have no idea, but I will say as a plug, when I was a kid, one of my early Halloween costumes was as a wizard, and my mom made me a perfect wizard hat. I had it
Nice.
for a long, long time. I don't know whatever happened to it, but she used to make a lot of our Halloween costumes, and they were perfect.
That
I
was that
mean,
was that was spot on. And so the
yeah.
reason Kulan Gath is like so agitated at Spider-Man is Spider-Man is part of a joke, took the point of his wizard's hat, so he just has like the flat top. So like that's I think that's what set this all off. And yeah, I didn't see the stigmata when I first looked at it, but just like this isn't quite John Buscema level a functional torture device that one could build. John Romita Jr. doesn't have all that practical training in devices, but it looks pretty. Those clamps look pretty spider strength clamp.
Oh, and by the way, it gets worse.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and
It gets way worse.
is this the first time John Romita Jr. is drawing the New Mutants? Because once again, he does the Kirby
Maybe.
crackle really well for Sam Guthrie.
Oh no, no, that's Sunspot.
Yeah. So Sam Guthrie is the blonde with the crew
Yes.
cut. Yeah, Sunspot. He's doing a really great job at these characters, which I don't think he has all that much history with. Um, Once again, the amount of effort that's gone into all of these panels just seems like pretty big. And it's not even an annual issue or a big numerical issue. And we're going to get into that at the end of this episode when we do a little wrap. But this just looks like your shoulders are going to be killing you, and your neck to keep your neck up. And this is, I can't see the facial features, but the body language is so good. Like the kind of insouciance that Kulan Gath just seems to be like peering at this guy with just seems well, he
And
spells
is
out
he
his
part
villainous plan.
reptile? In rereading it, I was like, oh, is Cooling Gath like part lizard?
Oh, so I don't really want to delve into the Conan mythos, but there's this deity called Set, which anyone who has glimpsed
Ah,
the somewhat entertaining cartoon from the 90s, like Set is sort of like this snake deity, and a lot of the villains, and I'm just blanking on like the imaginary country that they're from, they worship this demon Set. And
oh, okay.
so that's kind of like meant to be out of the depths of the jungles and the desert, Set is lying in wait, and those who want to sort of appeal to him for power will have to do some sort of bargain with their earthly and their spiritual side in order to be given this authority. And so some of the people, the villains in these Conan-ish worlds, are kind of like lizard people, not lizard people in the Hollow Earth. That's a separate conspiracy theory. The conspiracy theory in the Conan world is like the lizard followers like of the deity Set. So I think that's enough. We've avoided all of the controversy regarding the reptilians, and we should be good to go. Yeah, and we can just edit out the last 5 minutes if the government gets on us, Patrick.
Yeah,
But
long live the lizard people, as far as I'm concerned. I'm a friend of, I have no problem with them.
their skincare needs to be better though.
Fair.
Although if I was 8,000 or 800 years old, I'm not sure how old Kulan Gath is. So I like he's in pretty good shape. His I mean, his eyes are bloody, but his vision looks clear, you know.
You know, a lot of these comic books around this time had Clearasil commercials, but I think maybe he had missed that.
Yeah, I don't know if this is too old or too like I think that might be coming down the pike, Patrick. I think right now they're advertising like those magazines that you go around and try and sell to your neighbors. And if you sell enough, like if you sell 1 million of these magazines, you can get a bicycle.
Or a kazoo.
Yeah, that's only if you that's yeah, if you sell one. So just Spider-Man obviously needs to be rescued, and then Spider-Man though is like Kulan Gath has just got him where he wants him. And he seems to have also managed to convince a whole lot of the real world, like Avengers and superheroes and X-related characters that aren't in the sort of conspiracy, just tear Kulan Gath's rule down into following him, whether that's via mystical means like the Morlocks or whether it's via the sheer personality, because like this guy isn't Mr. Charisma, but he must have something going for him.
And also the Xavier Caliban hybrid too, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
he's using Professor Xavier's mental powers too, I think,
Okay, because
in
he
conjunction with his spells.
so he's got Xavier in his pocket as well. I wasn't sure that Caliban. I actually thought that he was drawing energy from Caliban, as this Caliban Xavier hybrid, but he's also using that to sort of keep up his force of will, I guess. And this is another beautiful set of panels, and I might have missed the one like is that's Doctor Strange in there, right, in that top panel.
Mhm.
He doesn't look too secure. And now we have Kulan Gath's like one-on-one power. It's one thing to like abuse Xavier's powers and like have him keep everyone kind of under your mental thumb. Now we actually see like what can this guy do man on man? In the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird battle. How hard can he go, Patrick? He goes pretty hard,
He goes
actually.
hard in the paint.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just like, and what I love is human face, our face is sacred, right? Like someone touching your face with a fist or with their hand, that's almost like contemptuous of your personhood and your individuality, right? And this guy's just like clutching like the Shakespeare thing where he holds the skull and stuff. Like this guy's just like clutching her while she's awake. Just I don't know if that was meant to be a thing. It just comes across as like he's just contemptuous of how low level these really high level characters are when we see them outside of this environment, like Patrick. So I'm pretty confident that this is a reasonably powered individual, and they're just like stolen of their personhood, their ability to communicate, and they're just for good measure like turned into some sort of Cthulhu tentacle person, which
I mean, yeah, he may have a penchant for tentacle porn. I know this is a family channel, so we can't get into that, but this is the second time that he's sort of tentacleized one of his foes. Seems to be one of his favorite tricks. But yeah, again, sort of haunting, right? Anytime there's a Defenders issue, I think that we'll be doing at some point that I think I mentioned to you in text. And to me, it's reminiscent of that, where we have some sort of faceless beings that they call zeros.
okay.
And here he's sort of, wiped out part of her face just with a wave of his hand.
And look at this projection of power. So unless all of that text didn't quite get to the point of this, like, his yeah, he's not an enfeebled sort of lick figure. Some of those kind of tomb people who run the army of skeletons, like when they first awake, they're kind of like that's when they're vulnerable. This guy's beyond that period. He's not vulnerable. He's not some sort of like weakened character. He's robust and he's strong. Um and what are the Avengers in Storm and Callisto going to do about it? Well, they're just going to trash the place. It looks like.
Well, they're sneaking around at first, and then they sort of get found out by a raiding party. Now you can see here that even though Celine's been captured, her group of conscripts are still working, trying to figure out how they're going to, foil the wizard's plan. And they do get split into groups by this raiding party. You see that Storm is saved by Warlock, who is the only New Mutant that wasn't affected by the spell because of his techno-organic form. So
Such a
they
cool,
form
cool
a
visual.
group.
Such a cool visual. Like, what a cool way to get across the fact that you're a machine and a living machine. Really great.
They sort of form one group, and then the rest of the team kind of gets split into two by this raiding party, and they sort of all go about their own ways of trying to infiltrate the wizard's castle and see if they can overthrow him from power.
So, how old were you when you read this the first time, Patrick? Like, when did you get this?
Probably 11.
Okay, so but you didn't know the New Mutants and that. Like, what you're getting out of it is just from this.
Actually, I probably was aware of the New Mutants. I had the was it Marvel's second graphic novel
Oh,
was
yeah. So
which
because
is
I know
really
you
great.
don't like Senkovich, so I'm like, I don't think he's picking up
And
like,
that's why I always wanted to collect the New Mutants, but I hate to say this because I know you're very much an art guy, and I appreciate these people, right? I really
yeah,
do. I'm not necessarily an artist in that way. I never really practiced drawing much after like fourth or fifth grade, so not necessarily never like sort of wanting to crap on anybody's skill level. But the New Mutant art at that time just wasn't what I was looking for as a preteen, as an
yeah.
early teen. So I
Oh,
never really got into them, but I love the characters. And the reason was is because I had that graphic novel. I had the New Mutants graphic novel, which had that clean art that I love.
yeah,
And I love the characters. I love the way they were all from different countries. They were kids, their interaction and how they all had different motivations. I mean, it was like a redo of the new X-Men. And yet they all had the same uniform, which was kind of cool in its own way. And yeah, I loved it. But the main story, once the title started, it was hard for me to kind of get into because the art at that time kind of affected my enjoyment more than it would like say today.
yeah.
But I also had the death of Captain Marvel,
Oh,
which I
okay.
think was
Another,
Marvel's first
is that Jim
graphic
Starlin?
novel. I'm sorry.
Is that
Yeah,
Jim Starlin? Yeah.
it's so good. And it was good when I was a kid. I got those both for Christmas, I think. Maybe in a pack somehow. It's been a long time, obviously. But I reread the Death of Captain Marvel one maybe a few years ago, and being way older, it was even more impactful. Like, you really
Yeah.
you understand mortality a lot better 30 or 40 years down the road. So yeah, and in fact, maybe we could do that one, but it's probably one that's a little bit more pricey to get.
And is that guy's art just sizzles, especially when he does those cosmical characters. So anyway, we digress. So
Yeah.
so we're covering a lot here, but I don't think it's all that confusing in the book. And obviously Claremont is known for those extensive captions. Like I feel like I was on top of this story and the art was selling me on why these people are disliking or getting along and so on and so forth. That it was very coherent as far as something which involves three or four different teams, plus Doctor Strange and Spider-Man. Now, we've got one group which is Warlock and Storm, and then the other group which is sort of mainly just the normal Avengers, right? And maybe Nightcrawler. Is that true,
Well,
Patrick?
they've got a few with them, right? They've got uh Magic and Colossus.
Okay, yeah,
Then they've got Celine's conscripts of Magma and Rachel. They're not sure if they can trust them because they know Celine's evil, and those two kind of just stand off by themselves. So they're not really sure if they can trust them. But then, like you said, they've got the Avengers. Callisto is still around, and Nightcrawler.
yeah. Who just to look more inconspicuous decides to wear a massive white cloak, like he's gone boys to men style in this
He disappears in the shadows, but he looks great in white.
yeah. Which is
They've
which
also picked up the librarian, by the way, the redhead who I don't know, maybe to give, what we've talked in previous podcast episodes about the human element or
Yeah,
viewpoint, that Jarvis kind of serves, or different players. Sue Digby, I think, was the other one in JLA.
and
So I think
maybe
so.
Siobhan and Gina in
PG
yeah,
Samo,
yeah.
yeah. So this is our human sort of hero, is the redheaded librarian there.
And I'm hoping, Patrick, we can drive up the price of this issue by noticing that it's a first appearance of this character.
I don't know if she ever makes a second one, but
This
yeah,
is a
absolutely.
this is a
And
key issue.
if I recall correctly, I mean, we'll see. Maybe. Well, actually, I can just check real quick. I think the librarian, yeah, she's one of the few people who gets out of it alive. So not to give everything away, but when I say there's stakes in this comic, there are stakes. We have a lot of people who are killed and dismembered. Uh, you
Chained
know,
up.
there's a lot of chaos and havoc that is wrecked.
Yeah, no, I felt that the destruction in this was real. It wasn't just like, oh, it's all going to disappear when old mate has to leave and Kulan Gath's, vice-like grip on these people's mentality is gone. Like whatever happens is kind of like really happening. At least to the people, maybe not to the buildings and all that sort of stuff. And you know, John Romita Jr. has all that old school shit where people look like people and all the anatomy is correct, and I can draw chairs and there's enough chairs to sit, which is a big issue for everybody. The doors are all the right size, there's a background. But I just thought I'd highlight this panel because he does have that like emerging in the 80s, the cool ways of which we can lay the page out. So it's not like, a 2 by 3 or I mean, we'll get into the grid at some point, I'm sure, but it's not total grid locked like those 6 panels. I mean, some of those things that we're reading in the Avengers, 18 of the pages are the 6 panel grid, and it just gets tiresome, especially if there's a lot of text on the page. Whereas these are like way back shot. This is an establishing shot. This is like a real zoomed close up of someone's eye and their nose and their cool haircut and a nice
But it
profile,
kind of leads your eye too, right? So as Aurora and Warlock are ascending into the sky,
Yeah,
I mean, even though you do read down, the drawing kind of leads you up
yeah.
to
And
start.
these guys are going into a dungeon and then these guys are like escaping out of this hellhole. It's kind of cool. And you don't notice it. Like it's not something that I'm reading it and I'm going, oh yeah, like it's not like when you read I don't read a book and go, oh yeah, they're doing some great alliterations and similes. I can't wait to read more. I don't read these comics and try and dissect them as I read it. It's just something that when I go through them again for our podcast, I'm like, oh wow, these are the things that make this work. And it wouldn't necessarily not work with something in someone else's hands, but it is just for something so complicated, it's going beautifully well. Except I'm not sure that Callisto's outfit is entirely appropriate for um, what is going to be the dying embers of the comic code pretty soon. But I like how her outfit is more revealing in this sword and sorcery world than in the normal one. It's just very bizarre, Patrick, some of these choices. Whereas Nightcrawler is just not showing any skin at all, which is fine. Um, Brutal.
Yeah,
Like
this is sort of the
who's
last assault on Kulan Gath. The different groups have finally infiltrated the castle, and they sort of attack him in different groups, and they're just dealt with mercilessly. I think what I love truth in advertising for covers. And if I recall correctly, I think Vision and Colossus do get into it, and they have a sort of man-on-man battle. There's explosions of characters. I think this is
yeah,
what's taken out Captain America here. You can see the second battle group gets turned to stone by Scarlet Witch, and Spider-Man is being crucified. As told you, it gets worse.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's a dire circumstance by this point. And
Part
you
of
do
me is
wonder,
wishing this was one of my first comics, Patrick. Like, but then everything just pales into comparison. Like, I don't know where you can go after you have this. This is something
well,
that is appearing on the shelf every month. You could just clock in and clock out and not have to care. But this just seems like it's firing all cylinders. What a time to be alive.
yeah, no, for real. I always say very lucky my generation. But you and yeah, I love this that you've saved this one where we've got Kulan Gath's eyes looming over the Scarlet Witch, whom he's controlling, who then with these crazy elongated fingers is turning the team into stone. And then you talk about their expressions. I mean, look at Nightcrawler, looks like he's straight out of Pompeii or Herculaneum, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, Kulan Gath is just like he's got some heat to him. You know, he can do
He's
the
taking
stuff.
on, again, let's just recap. He's taking on the Avengers, the X-Men, the New Mutants, Doctor Strange, Selene, the Morlocks, the entire island of Manhattan.
Yeah,
He's given them hell. Like
yeah,
Galactus is the only person I can think of who is on a par with him. I mean, such a great villain.
yeah. No, just and it his power level obviously has to come across in his Conan stories as like he has to have a physical threat because Conan is a physical guy, but then he's also got all this other stuff, right? I think that they're doing justice to this villain. Does that make sense? They're not short selling him in, oh, we need an X-Men villain, we'll just use this guy. And yeah, just this reminds me of all those great Spider, the Nothing Stops the Juggernaut, and then the one where he's under the collapsing pylons and stuff. Like, I know the meme is that Peter Parker quits being Spider-Man every, 60 issues or whatever, but there's no quitting with this guy. I think he's doing what needs to be done, and the art is just selling this is not a fun gambolling sort of raucous Spider-Man. This is a Spider-Man who's like, it's either, the choice is, we do this or that's it. It's kaput.
Well, and the character goes from being the Spider-Man that we're used to, right? He's in the previous issue, if you recall, he's running from the New Mutants, he's cracking jokes, he goes into the bar where or the tavern where the
Yeah,
Avengers are, and he's very much the old Spider-Man that we know. But by this point, he's he's really been through it, and to see the character behaving in such a serious way makes the reader realize that the stakes are real. I also love it when and we've seen this in some comics that we've done lately, but I don't know if I've commented on it, but I definitely feel it here. And actually, I was doing some reading. I won't reveal the issues, but for some podcasts that we have coming up, they elicited this feeling, and it happened to be from the same title. um but that sense of frustration and that you can have as a reader of feeling like all is lost and how are we going to get out of this, when you can really, and when I've already read these, right, I've been
yeah,
reading
no,
these comics for 40 years.
yeah, the
But
rate,
yet when
yeah,
you see Spider-Man breaking free from his crucifix, and what you're seeing here is he's telling the people that are there, the few people that are still left that haven't been killed, that haven't been turned to stone, that maybe they're injured, they're laying there bleeding out, and he's telling them the amulet, this is how we can defeat him. We've got to take his amulet. It's the source of his power. But Spider-Man is the only person that still speaks English on the whole island of Manhattan, except for Warlock, who we don't know, but doesn't seem to be present. And nobody knows anything about Warlock. He's sort of a mystery at this point. But, he knows the answer. He's still alive. He's able to speak it, but he can't get it across to anyone. And getting that across, and when you see it as a reader, the combination of the words and the art, it really is great.
yeah. Just some
Can't say enough
people who
about it.
they're people who know what they're doing. They're, just it's selling it great. And this is like a busy issue, like I've said. but these things come across, and when you reread it, it still is great because there's so much packed into this issue. You see something different. You see something different every time. This has got to be another one of these beautiful panels. The techno-organic hang glider wings.
He does skip leg day.
Yeah, such great imagination though to draw that and to have that baked into the story. Like this is how we're going to get them there because, you know, we need this to be plausible. More great expressions. This is the climax, and this I think this is coming across pretty well. Patrick, this is like if you just look at this panel here, you can just see him on his throne thing and just like all these just dilapidated, just destroyed people. But who's coming from the top to save the day? Such a cool design of these individual panels could have been splash pages all by themselves.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
just when
nonetheless,
you think that they've swooped in and saved the day,
yeah, yeah, just
I mean, honestly, when you read this for the first time, and honestly, even in rereading it, it felt to me, again, I've had this comic for almost 40 years. And to me, it felt like, oh, yes, this is how it resolves. It was like
yeah,
almost like I forgot. And she steals the amulet. Like Warlock has been able to explain to Storm what they need to do without being able to use words. She does it without having powers. You know, they surprise him. She gets the amulet. She tosses it to somebody that she thinks is on her team. And then we find out that Celine has been masquerading the entire time as another character. And we've gone from out of the frying pan and into the fire.
yeah. So good. I don't know how much this page is worth, Patrick, but I'd pay a pretty penny to have this like in my possession. This page, right? Like it's just so cool. And just look at the anguish on like everyone's face. Like, the ultimate heel turn.
She's like,
It's
surprise.
yeah. You could imagine if this was the theater, there's not a, you'd hear the gasp in the
Everybody
crowd.
clutches the pearls at the
Yeah,
same time.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and these aren't trivial characters who are being shocked. Like these are the heavy hitters who realize like pretty much all is lost, and they're one big hope at the end, like Storm and the one person who sort of has a sheer force of will. Like I'd say Storm. Like Storm is powerless at this point, but she's still rocking. She's still hanging with the X-Men. And Warlock is just like essentially a computer from the future, and who's also a machine. Like you think, oh, with their sort of powers combined, they're going to pull us through. Like that was what that soaring thing was meant to be. And then when I reread this, like for the first time for this podcast for the longest time, I was like, oh yeah, that's how it resolves. Like, Storm comes swooping in, and yeah, it's all good. Not really, Patrick.
Yeah,
Not
like I said,
really.
it really kind of surprised me. And I did a reread that the reread that you're doing of the Chris Claremont. I just noticed in my notes that I had done that maybe around 2019,
Okay.
2020. So it hasn't even been that long.
Yeah.
I was so involved in the story and it was, throwing me from side to side, hither and to, and that at the end I was right in it. I was like, oh yeah, and I fell for it again. So it's really well written.
Yeah. And then we've
And
got
we know as readers that once you're turned into techno-organic creature, that's the end for you. So
that's
as like
yeah, that's
yeah, as a
his
reader, we don't know if is the storm going to be like this forever or what.
that's the flip side to his coin. With his great powers, he has to like he'll never be normal, right? He's always fighting this techno organoid nano sort of cancer, for want of a better word, right?
Right, and he has to be super careful because I think he he, he can sort. I feel like Warlock is like a vampiric creature as well,
Okay.
where what we're seeing Storm do to Selene, I think that's what he can do. I guess he can control whether or not he does, but he sort
But
of
he
turns things into techno-organic creatures like himself and then drains their life force. And I
but he
think
has to
that's what.
limit, otherwise he'll do that to his friends and so on, right? Okay, so luckily, we had Stephen Strange on the scene just to, and he was sort of captured way back in a similar way. And Patrick, I didn't put that image up, but now I wish I did. He was neutralized because he had that same vanishing mouth that the that Kulan Gath is able to do to stop magic users from using their spells. So, like, pretty creative way to keep these people out of the loop. Does he have his gray? He's got his one gray temple here. Um, yeah, just maybe the coloring is a bit funny on that one. But once again, just you get to go to town on these great panels. Selene will be back, right, Patrick? We haven't seen the last of her.
We have not. And in fact, her involvement gets even more, let's say deep with the X-Men going forward.
And I do like that they're not one-off villains. Like, and it's not entirely that they were a villain. It's just that maybe Selene was just making the best of whatever bum deal like got.
No, she's a villain.
Um, oh no, I just mean
I'm
like
just kidding.
the what would you arrest this person for if you called the police like that?
I mean, well, but she's murdered thousands of people over thousands of years.
I guess so. But yeah, good luck. Good luck proving that someone can even live for 1,000 years.
I mean, it's fair.
It just what I was trying to get at is that
She is above the law,
it's
though.
almost like the soap opera villains, like Days of Our Lives. Like, if you just watched one episode, you would think this is just the silliest thing ever. Why do they hate each other? Whereas the fact that we're going to be seeing more and more of this character down the line, you kind of get that it's like a personal vendetta as opposed to just being the villain of the week, which is what I was trying to get at.
Well, and she's someone that, I never liked her character, what she did, right? Because she's super evil and just murderous and haughty and, torturous of other characters, and she hates certain characters and sort of goes out of her way to get them. But there's also something about her that is so fascinating and just a great character, and it has nothing to do with underboob or anything like that. She's just a very captivating character, in my opinion. I thought so then. I think so now. I don't know how much she's been used since these days, but I couldn't get enough of her at the time.
Yeah, yeah. No, the
I felt the
this
same way to a degree about Emma Frost, the White Queen. Um, but if you ask me, and like I said, I haven't followed the X-Men in many years, but I think losing her as that same sort of haughty, very powerful, above it all villainess I think that's a miss for me.
Yeah,
Uh,
I must admit I do like her in Generation X when she basically like that third New Mutants class. She runs the class. That's kind of a cool change. It's this character is the same, but the environment changes and how they interact with that is a cool storyline. But yeah, I'm not the Emma Frost, Jean Grey, Scott Summers thing got a bit tired. It's kind of cool when it started, but a bit tired.
do you
And
think when you have a well-developed villain that you can sort of mm, love to hate in that way?
yeah,
Like, Selene is nobody's hero.
yeah,
I mean, she is evil to the core, but there's something about her that, for at least for me, that's magnetizing and
they're
that you
they're a
want to see her
compelling
show up.
villain. They're a compelling villain.
Very compelling.
Hannibal
And I think
Lecter,
that can be difficult, right? To me, and I may be barking up the wrong tree. In fact, I probably am with you, but like somebody like Dr. Octopus is not compelling for me.
No,
Uh,
he's far more compelling when he becomes Spider-Man than he ever is as Dr. Octopus.
so and I think a lot of villains suffer from that. Like you said, they're placeholders in a way, or I don't know, maybe they're not powerful enough. I don't, or maybe it's the stakes. I don't. I We could talk about this later, probably in more depth, and maybe we'll get into it on future podcasts. But there's something about her that is very captivating, and like I said, I definitely I felt like, in fact, I feel like Sebastian Shaw in the Inner Circle as a whole is very much like that.
Yeah, I mean, I could read a spin-off um Savage X-Men where they all have to stay in this Kulan Gath and they fight Kulan Gath in a 24 or 48 issue miniseries. And I could live with like the Hellfire Club as a comic. Like it's like the JLA, but it's the Hellfire Club. That would work for me because they not only do they all have a common cause, they all have an individual rivalry, and that I find very compelling. Whereas like watching someone and all their mates carry on and save the day is a different type of itch that you're scratching. And I think what you're trying to say is like this Selene is a very compelling villain. I abhor all of her ideals and what she stands for and how she goes by things, but nonetheless, you can't look away.
Yes.
Um,
And Kulan Gath is much the same. These are the only two issues I've ever read of him. I do not have the Marvel team up. I never was really into Red Sonja. But yeah, somebody that, if you, like you said, if you were to say, oh, Kulan Gath's going to fight the Legion
yeah,
in place of Mordru the Merciless, it's now Kulan Gath in the 31st century. Take my money, as you
yeah,
said.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Actually, we should just make a bootleg Kulan Gath series ourselves and just have all of the characters that we want try and fight Kulan Gath, and then have on the second last page like the most brutal, torturous contraption that he can conceive of to imprison whatever heroes that you put in it, right? Like it's kind of yeah, all that stuff, all that pent up rage and adolescent vitriol you can just put into these things and our librarian is safe. Is that Ilyana Rasputin?
Yeah,
And so
see, Doctor Strange uses her power to basically turn back time so that the last 24 hours haven't happened. And the only people that will remember what actually did happen are the people that were still present and alive when he does that. So you can see how many people have made it out of this alive.
yeah,
Uh, Not very many.
no, it's pretty rough. And I kind of like these interact like I kind of like the Charles Xavier is a very abused character in 2025, I must say. Some of the things that he did in the X-Men comics in the 60s and 70s have aged poorly, but this guy is not the maniac that some people think it is convenient to portray him as. And I know I don't have stakes in this character, but I feel like he's been poorly done by various creative teams down there.
Bastardized.
Yeah, just I don't know what they disliked about some of their school headmasters, but I think it's kind of like wish fulfillment on behalf of some of these writers who, by the way, created the X-Men and made a house for them and trained them and all this other stuff. Like I can understand people not wanting to be at school forever. That's why they go off and they do other stuff, but it doesn't mean that this person who trained them was necessarily like the worst person on planet Earth. Anyway, end of sermon. That gets into a little bit of the more modern stuff, which I find not to my taste. But Patrick, we've wrapped this up. This is two issues um, so rich, like 25
Well,
pages
and
each.
don't bury the lead because that wasn't the last page.
Oh, did I miss out another page?
You might not have had it, but there is one
No,
more
I
page
do. Oh, I beg everyone's pardon. We've got to get back into our
because
share.
that you take something that for me was one of my favorite comics of all time, and then on the last page, you drop a hint that is going to lead into my other favorite comic read of
Yeah.
probably all time, for the X-Men, at least from this period. They've accidentally brought Nimrod, a super futuristic sentinel from the future. Did I say futuristic twice? Back to New York City, present day, to just wreak havoc on the mutants of New York City and beyond. And this, he's another one like Celine, who for me at the time was just an amazingly captivating character who I felt raised the stakes every time he appeared. He's super adaptable. So you can never use your power against him the same way twice, and it really pressures Chris Claremont to do what he does really well. And I already wrote my notes for one of these issues coming up, so I'll go ahead and say it because I'll say it again. One of the things that I think he really does super well that I don't know if people recognize is using these characters and knowing them so well and using his imagination to have them use their powers in concert and in new and interesting ways. And for me, then as a preteen, as a teen, and even today as a grizzled old man, that's what I like the most in comic books. I've said this many times to you. I like comic book characters with powers, with interesting powers. They don't have to be Superman. They don't have to have be overly powered, but being able to have some special ability and being able to use it in new and exciting ways and in creative ways. To me, that's what I like. Probably one of the things I like the best about comic books, and Chris really does that well with these X-Men. And he even has to do it even more against an opponent like Nimrod. So yeah, they've unleashed a genie that they're only going to find out later how much damage they've done to themselves. I actually don't know if they ever realized that that's how he appears in present
Uh,
day or not.
what I enjoyed, Patrick, is it's so easy to have these trite endings. Oh, I turned back time, a la
Yeah.
Cher, and oh, everything is hunky dory. Well,
Nothing happened.
I don't know who said it first, but in the seeds of our successes, we sow our future failures. So
Yes.
by doing that, they created a beacon for this Nimrod guy to just like, oh, this is like where I
There's a
degrade.
cost.
It's so good. It's like that what one might consider to be a dream story, which is all these glorified like time or oh, I woke up, all those things that like literary shortcuts that we all kind of hate. The shortcut created the next drama, and
Yes.
that is really cool.
Very so cool. Like, and I even remember thinking, like, having that realization as a kid of being like, oh my God, that is so cool. Like, yeah, there's a cost for your actions. There are consequences for, oh, you want all these heroes back to life and for all of this to not happen? Okay, well, guess what's coming next? And you'll find out.
Yeah, no, fantastic issue, Patrick. Fantastic characterization, fantastic action. I'm pleased that we reread this, and I'm actually looking forward to it again in context as I do my great X-Men reread, to be very honest. A few things that I just wanted to check over with you. Where's this in the X-Men pantheon? We've got Days of Future Past, we've got the
Mm.
Dark Phoenix saga, we've got
I mean, it's only two issues, but for
the
me, it's
Trial
right
of
up there.
Magneto. Where does this lie for you?
I mean, like I said, it's only two issues, but for me, it's right up there. I love putting the X-Men, it's not the only time that they've done this, right? The X-Men also had that, I think it was a two annual, maybe annual number 9, and then a New Mutant special where they go to Asgard and
Yeah,
they're kind of done in this barbarian wizards and warriors kind of a style. But it's so good. And for me, just hits just in the right spot. Again, I don't exclusively like this kind of fantasy fiction. I guess I think it can be called this genre. I looked it up. Swords and
so
sorcerer.
swords
I
and
don't know.
sorcery is like where the world where magic does not take the place of technology. Like they're still living in essentially a pre-medieval world. Whereas like fantasy fiction is where society and stuff, magic has taken the place, like that's splitting the hairs. Magic has taken the place of technology. So like, in swords and sorcery, a plague comes through, everyone gets sick. In these other sort of fantasy worlds, a plague comes through and oh, we have magic healers and all this stuff. Does that
Okay,
so
yeah.
so Conan
I
does,
actually
yeah.
Googled this because
Okay.
I wanted to know, but I had forgotten already. Because I was like, this has to have this particular genre has to have a name, and yeah. And then I read all the genres of fiction, and
Yeah.
yeah. And by then you're like, okay, I've gone way down into the rabbit hole, and I can't remember any of this anyway. So yeah, it's not that I exclusively like that, but the juxtaposition of having these characters that we know and we see doing so many things in modern day, and then transported into this other kind of realm. And the stakes, like you said, there are so many. Even though time is turned back at the end, so many characters get maimed or killed, and it's not that I like to see that. But as a reader, it elicits a response. When you see your favorite character get shot in the head, even if they do come back at the end, you still have that response. So there are longer, maybe better storylines, and that's fair to say because this is sort of a two-issue special. But for a two-issue special, it's so good, and it sticks with me. I mean, for me, there are tons of issues of X-Men around this time period that I think are excellent, that I love. But when we were talking about this, I immediately said, "Oh, Kulan Gath," because it's one that sticks with me. It's special. It sticks out. Like I said, it's sort of a step outside their normal plot path that they were going on. I don't know why. There probably was an editorial reason that they decided to stick these in there because they are outside the norm of when you do your reread, you'll sense it, right? You're
Yeah.
like, oh, these two have kind of, I don't want to say wedged in because it's really seamless the way it works. For example, you haven't gotten there yet, but the reason Aurora is on the ship and the reason the X-Men are in Manhattan and are captured by this spell is because they have accompanied Storm to the docks and decided to stay the night in the city to see her off on the ship that she's going on her pilgrimage on.
Okay.
So
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 yeah.
all of this, there are actual reasons. It's not like they had to come up with reasons why the X-Men were also, no, they were in Manhattan for a reason. Like because that was the first thing when I did this because I am not doing the full reread. I was like, they're in Westchester. Like, why are they even here? And that's how the New Mutants got there is
Oh,
Xavier
okay.
tempts them. Some of them were in the city, but the rest he controls them and brings them into the curtain of the spell. So all of it's really explained super well. So now I will say that like I said, having finished the four issues that are coming up, y'all don't want to miss that. Maybe even better.
So yeah, rest assured, this is not the last of the X-Men that we will see on here. This is not the last Johnny Romita Jr. and Chris Claremont that we will see. And I just want everyone to kind of realize like best is different to favorite. So maybe Days of Future Past is the best X-Men, but it doesn't necessarily have to be your favorite. Your favorite
That's
can be because I picked this up when I was six. This is really awesome. It just so happens to also be one of the best. Like you just lucked out, Patrick. Like,
well,
uh,
I love Days of Future Past, and I think it stands the test of time. But in
the
rereading
pun.
it, yeah, good one. In rereading it though, I felt like it was a little shorter than I remembered or
It's
wanted
just
it to
two
be.
normal issues.
Yeah. I kind of, it's so much is made about it. Death of Phoenix is another one that is a great storyline. I love the Imperial Guard for obvious reasons. Um, so, those stories are great too. But, especially, it really struck me Days of Future Past. I thought, oh my God, this could have been a year long, or like you said, make this a mini series, like,
Yeah.
almost with that
Uh,
one I loved it so much that it almost detracts from it because I feel like it's not fleshed out as fully as it maybe even could have been.
in 2024 or 2025 or 2030, if comics are still around, Patrick, and you propose to do Days of Future Past, they're going to make it a seven-issue double-sized miniseries. There's going to be 14 tie-in like mini
Yes.
series. There's going to be like in the back of each issue like a whole fucking checklist to get the complete saga. Of that, three of them will be absolutely amazing. Like, and the rest of it, we could just, it'll be late. So that's why they only do seven issues, so we can get the
It'll be
12 issues
late.
in a year. What a, what I want to do is have John Byrne fill his day up doing like Days of Future Past, bootleg material that was like not included in the first one.
Well, we need some of these older creators that maybe are able to tickle our fancy, to say it in a way that someone from your side of the world might say it. And if they are maybe be past the point of wanting to do the kind of work, dictate it to someone else.
Oh yeah, I would love to see the scripts and the things that didn't make the cut. Now we're delving into the weeds here. I do want to get a couple of questions or like a
Sure.
couple of Q&As before, but Days of Future Past is one of the few classic X-Men's that was still doing when they were doing the backup story that aren't reprinted. And so we didn't get any bonus material for Days of Future
Mhm.
Past. Now we did get bonus material in the sense that the whole mid 1990s event was essentially like the X-Men in the Days of Future Past
A
run.
retread, yes.
Some of those are excellent, some of those are terrible. Like I said, but it runs for, hundreds of issues across dozens of
See, I never
titles.
got into the cable and the pouches and the belts. Not really. It was never my thing. Plus, I was in college and kind of getting out, so I was living my own
So,
life at that
so that's
point.
what
So,
this channel is about, some back and forth between Patrick and I to kind of force some reading that might be unfairly overlooked or might have just been unaware of. My other thing is I'm surprised that we didn't do more. You did mention there's some Asgard issues of the X-Men, Patrick. As far as I know, there's no Kulan Gath reappearances
I don't think
anywhere.
so.
Okay. So, because I was just checking, are there episodes of Excalibur which sort of has that? Because
I've
they
never
go
read a
into a
single.
medieval world for a little while.
I did
Excalibur.
not know Excalibur existed. So, in the storyline that we're getting close to reading
Yeah.
and recording at some point, some of the X-Men, sort of the team kind of breaks apart and is reconfigured. It was very difficult for me as a kid at that time to accept. I did stick with the X-Men for a little bit longer after that. Um, and I didn't know until years later that Excalibur was a thing, that's where some of the older characters had turned up in. So yeah, it's kind of a blind spot for me.
Yeah, delve into it because it does have Alan Davis art, a lot of these issues, and that's worth the price of admission alone. So this is leading into my next question. So even though you got this quite young and you really liked it, and then you got into the classic X-Men, Patrick, is this the beginning of the end for you, or the end of the beginning? Are we getting into this phase where I know that you sort of turn
No, I
away from?
think not to give it away, but what I realized in finishing the four-story arc that's coming up
Mhm.
is I think that was. So
Okay.
I will say the Mutant Massacre was probably where I tried when the team was sort of reconfigured with Dazzler and Havoc. I always liked Havoc as a character. Some of the old ones had stuck around. I even think I said to you, uh, I have family from Australia. I consider it the motherland. But when the X-Men ended up in Australia, I was very much on my last legs with them. So
Cancelled. Patrick, you're getting cancelled.
I hate to say it. My grandmother is literally from the Outback, but when they were in the Outback, I was like, yeah, just it's losing me. But yeah, a lot of I really loved the group. They did a lot with the new X-Men, right? But they kept the nucleus of that team going for a long, long, long time. And I understand that maybe they felt like they needed to change things. but things were so shaken up by the Mutant Massacre, and then Inferno was
Yeah,
kind
so
of after
the less
that.
said about Inferno, the better, Patrick. But we are going to cover a tangential Inferno on the channel. So what we might do in the future is once I'm past reading the Mutant Massacre, I might find a few things to sling your
Yeah.
way because that, in my mind, is when we have some great art in the X-Men, but what happens then is X Factor, Excalibur take a few of your characters and
Hmm.
they spin off a different series. A lot of it is written by Chris Claremont, so it's still his vision, but it's starting to become like Law and Order. If you have one guy who can write these good scripts and then you bring them across 5 shows, all of a sudden, instead of 26 episodes being really good, 6 of them are really good, and they're all done by that same guy or that same lady, right? I think the X-Men suffers from that, and it just so happens Uncanny X-Men has all the characters you don't necessarily care for in it,
Yeah.
rather than necessarily being a deterioration of quality. I think so. I think maybe
I got into X Factor too, by the way, from
okay,
the beginning. But I felt like that was the same thing. I liked it a lot for the first few issues. I don't even know, maybe 10, I feel like a 10 or 15. And then I just couldn't, but it might not. I've been talking about this a lot lately. It's like I heard someone on TV and he was saying, oh, I would have been able to do this when I was younger. And now I feel like I'm not the same person. And I said to whoever I was watching TV with, well, yeah, he's old now. I'm like, none of us are the same person that
yeah.
we used to be, right? And so there's a lot of question when things happen in your life is this a point in my life, or is it that things around me are changing, or is it that I'm changing? Or sometimes it's both, right? Or maybe another example was a comedian that I really like. And I said, oh, well, she kind of got not canceled, and I don't want to get into cancel culture, but like, oh, was it that your shtick was getting old, or was it that these other things happened that caused you to be less popular and kind of get blackballed? Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah, yeah.
there's always the chicken or the egg when things like this happen. So around the time the X-Men were changing, I was changing a lot too, right? When you go high school, there was a change from junior high to high school in terms of comics. As I go back through and read these and see what year they came out and the ones that I got immediately. And then between high school and college, there was another even more drastic change. And I'd say by around mid-college, it was very hard for a comic book to capture my interest. I just in that period of my life, and then
Yeah.
I ended up getting back into them like a few years later. So I don't know if I can even blame the series or the
Oh no,
artists and
that's okay.
creators.
I
Not
just
blame.
know for someone who's into comics from the era that you are, you have some peculiar blind spots. But
Yeah.
that is like something that I now understand talking to you about this is like, oh, you weren't die hard from like the year 1979 to 1999. It was just you had your comics that you liked, and once you stopped liking them, you went to a slightly different thing, or and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Yeah, that's part of the channel is we're trying to uncover these like hidden gems. Kulan Gath, like Uncanny X-Men, if you're not aware of it, it's not a hidden gem, but maybe Kulan Gath is a bit of a hidden gem. And maybe this one coming up is overlooked because it is, I still think, Romita Jr. on art. So if people can piece together the clues pre-Mutant Massacre, but with JrJr, um, they might be able to find out what we will be covering very shortly. Now, the last thing is John Romita Jr., Patrick, a revelation. Now, I'm not going to list you his 50 years of professional comic book artistry. And people poo-poo this as sort of like a Nepo baby kind of thing. Oh, like the only reason he got a
No.
job is because like idiots. This guy is like out of this world good. Let me just give you a list of not the titles that he's illustrated, but the core like anniversary issues. He's done Superman Year One. Yes, Frank Miller decided to specially write Year One about Superman, but give it to JR Jr. to write. Like Batman Year One is like basically spawned an entire movie universe. DC is living off the fumes of year one. Guess who was asked to draw this by Frank Miller? None other than JrJr. We've got the anniversary issues of Amazing Spider-Man. 250. He did 500. He did 600, and he's also drawn an Amazing Spider-Man #1. I mean, one of those things is enough for anyone's career. He's got like a whole set. He will if he's alive, he'll be drawing Amazing Spider-Man 1,000. Um, he's also got Daredevil 250, Spectacular Spider-Man 50, and I saved the X-Men stuff for last. He drew X-Men 200 and X-Men 300. I mean, it's one is enough. Like, Patrick,
Leave some for the rest of us.
these are just the anniversary issues, not the also like the hundreds or thousands of other comics that he's drawn, but these are just what a guy.
Yeah.
I feel that his art, especially his faces, are so nuanced, they're done a disservice by the modern day coloring. The flat coloring gives the cartooning a moment to shine, whereas I think the modern coloring with all of the facial characteristics, like as my face is in some shadow, the facial characteristics all morphed with the different colors rather than with the black and white line work. I think,
I think one thing that stood out to me in this is how he achieved so much with just a relatively small amount of squiggle here, a little squiggle
oh
there,
yeah,
and then in concert, those all make a face. I know, I know that's simplistic to people who can do art, but you see people, and I have a couple of friends, long distance friends, who they can create amazing art. They're just incredible drawers,
yeah,
sketchers, whatever. Um, but it's more of a photorealistic drawing, right? Which is amazing to me. When I
yeah.
see it, I'm like, how the hell do you do that? Like, it's just amazing. His art isn't like that. It's, is that an eyeball that he's drawn? Yeah, it may be just a little dot with a line above it. And a lot of these artists that we're seeing are like, the Buscema was another one that I felt like not all of his faces look like, oh, I'm gonna sit and draw a face.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's the
yeah,
impression of the
to me,
thing.
that's it's
Yeah.
as someone who is not a visual artist like that. Yeah, it's that to me is just amazing.
And then doing it 25 pages and then doing it year after year after year after year. Yeah, it just boggles my mind. I thought I had to end on that. Like this guy is not the reason that we like this so much is because when Chris Claremont says, "Oh, you're gonna have to draw a tavern and a computer guy like who's made out of living circuit boards," and then and this wizard dude, and oh, like John Romita Jr. can do that. Um,
And
it,
this isn't what, like you said, this was a one-off. He's usually in the modern day drawing regular buildings and regular cars, lots of chairs for people to sit in.
yeah. No, it boggles my mind, Patrick, and I'm like, oh wow, you just lucked out picking this up as like your,
Oh yeah.
and
Well, and
we said,
especially like I said, when it was just this morning, I was in the grocery store and I walked by the magazines. Of course, they don't sell comic books in grocery stores anymore, but I saw something, I don't know why, and I thought, I can remember, like you wouldn't even just go, you would, I mean, dig through
you
it.
were
Like
so
maybe there's one
excited.
back here.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, if you couldn't find regular comics, you would find those little mini digests. I think I've told you that before. And those would be mixed in with the magazines and stuff. But man, you would just dig through, like, oh, please let there be something that looks interesting that I can flip through. Lots of group titles are the kind of things I like. And like I said, again, I don't I don't mean to keep on harping about this, but I just finished one of the issues last night. But I love a villain team up. I love villain groups. It takes the team concept and just turns it on its ear. And a team of villains working together, Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. When you're talking about the Days of Future Past,
Yeah.
that was one of my favorite things about that comic book when they recreated the Brotherhood under Mystique, who's just another captivating, amazing character. I feel like maybe she's even overplayed at this point, but in the '80s when you really had to savor her appearances more. Oh man, she's just an amazingly drawn, conceptualized. Um, her motivations, her evilness, the way she looks, the skulls on the belt. I
Yeah,
mean, I
yeah,
can't say
yeah.
enough about her. So
All right, I think that's a wrap, Patrick. That was Kulan Gath, Uncanny X-Men 190, 191. Do yourselves a favor, go out and get that, or
it,
reread it if you've already got it. It's worth the journey. And we will see you next time on the same Tarnished Bronze channel at possibly a different Tarnished Bronze time. So take care, everybody.